you work on. I cannot begin to tell you how many times I've sat down with a buyer and they told me, hey, we want a single family home that's at least 2,000 square feet. We want 4 bedrooms. We want this. And they're just going down the list of all these things they want. And then they ultimately end up buying a 1,500 square foot townhouse with 3 bedrooms. And it's like the complete opposite of everything they told me up front, right? And that's because usually when people get into the process of buying or purchasing, they start to realize there's all these other things that they didn't factor in, that they were like, oh, I wanted this, or oh, like I didn't even think about that, or oh, like, you know what? While this doesn't have X, Y, and Z, it does have A, B, C, and all these other things that I wanted to consider as well. And so welcome to the Home Goals Podcast, the ultimate guide for turning your home goals into a reality. I'm your host, Derek Thornton. Join us as we navigate the twists and turns of obtaining a home. We'll be offering expert tips, helping you avoid pitfalls, and championing your journey towards that cherished place to call home. In this week's episode, we're going to discuss some tips and advice for setting up your home search. All right, whenever a buyer is first thinking about the idea of owning a home or purchasing a property, one of the very first things they start doing is looking online, looking at different sites, touring different properties virtually if they can, but they're always going to be very calculated in the way they set up their home search. And so I'm going to give you all some tips from an agent's perspective in letting you know the best way for you to set that search up to make sure that you don't miss out on any potential options, which would be a great fit. That's kind of the main concern that many buyers have when they're setting up their home search is, I don't want to miss out on something that could be a great fit. That's just under the biggest concern, which is I don't want to buy a lemon, right? They don't want to buy a house that has a bunch of issues or is a money pit. That's the main concern, but just under that is missing out on something that could have been a better fit or that would have been a better option for them later on down the road. And so I'll talk about how to set that up. Most buyers, I think well over 90% of buyers last time they surveyed said they start their home search online, right? And so a lot of the things that you're entering into those criteria are very important because you could be missing out on things that are an exact match for what you're looking for, right? When you are starting your search online or when you're depending or leaning on that, nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that, but I want you to also understand that you're kind of at the mercy of whatever is showing up through your algorithms or what input is being received or used for those particular platforms. And so you want to make sure that you have a wide spectrum of all the things that are available to you and you don't miss out on that house that could be the right fit for you. Because again, as I said before in previous years, there is no such thing as a perfect house. And if you think you found the perfect house, live there for a few years and I guarantee you'll feel different, right? There's always something that's going to be missing. You want to find that 80-10-10 rule, right? 80% of the things that you want, 10% of the things that you can learn to live with, and 10% of the things that you can change. That's the goal, right? You're never going to find a house that is 100% everything that you want. You want to try to find something that lines up with those criteria that I just listed. And so this is one way to make sure that you are really giving yourself a full range of everything that's available to you. So the first thing you need to do is you need to define your why. Again, I told you all, looking at houses is fun, but the actual process of purchasing a property or buying a home is not a fun time at all. It's tedious, it's boring, it's expensive, it's annoying. You got to go through the loan underwriting process. If you got to get a loan, you got to do inspections and all this other stuff and title searches and warranties and all this other stuff that you really don't want to deal with. That is not a fun time to be going through, right? And so you have to have a motivation to want to go through with this home. It can't just be a matter of, oh, my parents have really been pushing me into buying or my friends told me I really need to buy, so that's why I'm doing it. No, you need to have a reason that makes sense for you because this can really put you in a bind and a tremendous financial detriment if you are not careful in making that decision. This needs to be something that you define for yourself, why exactly you want to live in that house. Are there certain features about that neighborhood? Or there's things about where the schools are in the area? All those things you need to be taken into consideration in understanding, okay, if this is the reason why I want to buy this house, if that reason were to change, does that dictate or change how I feel about this home? Right. So, for example, if you were gung ho about I have to be in a certain school district, and so you bought a house in this particular neighborhood just for that school district, if that district changes, or maybe let's say your kid goes there and you find out very quickly that it is not a good fit for them, is that going to then dictate or change how you move with your house? Because there's a good chance at that point you probably haven't lived there long enough to build up any real equity. And so now you might be essentially trapped into that decision or into that home, all because you wanted to move there for certain rights. So it's not just a matter of determining why you want to move there, but making sure that the reason why is not something that could change at the drop of a dime or something like that, right? There has to be some deeper reasons why that home or that purchase works best for you. And I can't be the one to tell you why that is. Your realtor can't, your family can't. You need to decide that for yourself, right? So determine first and foremost why you want to make that move. And also, if one of those reasons why dictates some of the criteria in your search, right? So that's the first thing, is define the why. Next, set the budget. And the best way and the most effective way for you to set the budget is for you to talk to a lender, right? And not just a cursory conversation with them. We're like, oh, I think I make around this or all that. And if you really want the concrete, accurate numbers, you need to sit down with them, provide the necessary information, provide your tax documents, everything like that, your pay stubs, let them run your credit. That's going to be the best way for you to be able to determine what you truly and actually qualify for, right? Don't just go through the process. What most people do is they say, oh, I can afford $2,000 of rent, so I'll just take that and kind of finagle around with a mortgage calculator, see if I can get it up to $2,000, and then that will be whatever I'm working with as far as like my price point goes. No, there's a lot of factors that can change or vary with that mortgage calculator, and the best way for you to determine that is by talking with the lender. And so you need to be able to set your budget realistically on what you feel comfortable with, but then also talk with a lender to see, okay, what is the actual price range I need to be aiming for? I've told you all the story. You guys have heard it in the past of how my wife's nudging of me to talk to a lender saved our family over $100,000, right? That is a big key to that, is that you need to have these conversations. I know a lot of people don't want to talk to the lender because they're like, I don't want them to tell me something I don't want to hear or give me some bad news, but that is the most effective way for you to set that budget. And kind of talking back to what we discussed last week, you want to make sure too that your max price points or even minimum price points are in line with what you can reasonably afford, right? It's okay sometimes in some situations to go a little bit above what you may be qualified for in your home search criteria, but in those cases you might need to be looking at houses that have been on the market for a really long time because they may be more agreeable to taking a lower price, right? And so set the budget, determine where you want that to land, and don't just go based off of your own estimations with a mortgage calculator or online program. Talk to an actual lender who is familiar with how deals and things work in that area, right? They know how taxes can change based on which county you're in. You want to talk to someone who is knowledgeable about the area and use them as the best way to determine where your budget needs to be set. Next thing you need to come up with is your non-negotiables. And if you're buying a house with someone else or another partner or someone that yours that's including this decision making, you all need to find a way to come together in whatever your non-negotiables might be. And so I've had some situations where I might have a piece of paper for both parties and say like, hey, what are your non-negotiables? What are the things that you have to have? And let's compare this list and figure out a way we can make it work as best we can, right? There are some times where they'll list out their non-negotiables. We'll input that right into the MLS to see what's available, and 0 homes pop up. And that lets us know immediately, okay, something's got to change. We need to figure out something else that we can use to make this work. What you guys are looking for, the budget that you're within, it doesn't provide what you are listing out on this sheet, right? And so we need to be able to go through, figure out what things are the non-negotiables, and how that applies to what houses are on the market, right? So for some people, they might say, hey, a non-negotiable for me is that I have to have a one-level home or something like that. Or they may say a non-negotiable might be that I need to have at least 2 bathrooms, or I need to be able to have a screen porch or something like that. Like there may be any number of things. I don't want you also to think that you have to constantly be thinking in terms of value. That's your realtor's responsibility to think through, okay, whether or not what you're trying to find could cause you some issues down the road when you go to sell that house. That's on their mind. You can just focus on, okay, what are the things that are most important to me in this house? Like I've told you guys before, I love to cook, and so counter space is a big thing to me. It's difficult to put that into a search criteria, and so that was something that we had to look at on kind of a case-by-case basis. But it was important for us to know that, because as we're looking at houses, whatever, we can quickly determine whether or not that's something that truly changes, or if there's something else that needs to go in there. But you need to figure out what those non-negotiables are, and then also go a step further and figure out, is there a way for you to get around that non-negotiable, right? And so if counter space, for example, is a really big deal to you, and there's a house that you love and it checks off all the other boxes except for that one, is there something else in that home that offers or kind of helps with that solution, right? Maybe there's a space for you to put a rolling island or a buffet or something that you can add to give you a little bit more extra space in there. Who knows? Like I said, you want to treat it on a case-by-case basis, but the important thing is that you don't want to just simply toss out a house because it doesn't have that 1 or 2 non-negotiable things to work on. I cannot begin to tell you how many times I've sat down with a buyer and they told me, hey, we want a single family home that's at least 2,000 square feet. We want 4 bedrooms. We want this. And they're just going down the list of all these things they want. And then they ultimately end up buying a 1,500 square foot townhouse with 3 bedrooms. And it's like the complete opposite of everything they told me up front, right? And that's because usually when people get into the process of buying or purchasing, they start to realize there's all these other things that they didn't factor in, that they were like, oh, I wanted this, or oh, like I didn't even think about that, or oh, like, you know what? While this doesn't have X, Y, and Z, it does have A, B, C, and all these other things that I wanted to consider as well. And so be open to your non-negotiables changing in some ways, but make sure that you have a clear, defined list of what that is right there as well. Next up, consider the commute, especially depending on what area you're in, right? So in the Triangle, our public transportation and everything and our options are nowhere near what they would be in a place like a New York or something like that, right? Where there's people who don't even have a license in many cases, right? We're a lot different. And so commute time is very different, and people's expectations around commute time are often different as well. You know what you're capable of dealing with or what's reasonable to you. I have some clients who come from places like LA and they move here and they're like, oh man, this traffic is a breeze. Like they can sit in an hour-long traffic and it's nothing for them because that's what they were used to every single day. Whereas for us, it's like, oh my goodness, this is the end of the world. This could not be any worse. Please make it stop, right? We're always like just going crazy because we have to wait on a certain time, or our commute time might be a little bit longer. You know you better than anybody else, right? You understand whether or not you're willing to sit through that long commute, and you want to factor that in with the house that you're going to purchase. I've seen a lot of people over the years who have sold homes because they just could not deal with that commute. It was taking up too much of their life, too much of their day, and they were like, hey, if I know that I can eliminate this hassle in my life, I'm going to find a way to do that, right? It's like water. It's the path of least resistance. And so factor in that commute time when you're looking at those houses and understand. Now, there are some tools and resources we have where you can literally pinpoint like wherever the commute time is to your job or your work or wherever it may be. And you can say, hey, I want no more than a 15-minute commute if I'm typically leaving the house at this time of day, and you can find houses that are just within that radius or fit within that, right? And so that's another great option that's available to you to see what things may work out there as well. But again, be honest and realistic with yourself when it comes to that commute time, because I have seen that turn into something that really changes someone's perspective on a house and really can make them miserable throughout the process. Next up, use your agent's MLS search, right? So there's a lot of tools and websites and resources that are out there that are all effective, and they offer their own things and they have different advantages as well. But you really want to be able to use something that is in conjunction with what your agent is focusing on, because we have a lot of rules and things that are in place to make sure that our information is as accurate as it can possibly be. Now, a lot of the other websites and third-party sites out there, they're pulling information from our MLS so that they can have it on there as well. But every now and then there are other properties that are for sale by owners, or other properties that may be listed for sale that are not necessarily bound or under the same rules and regulations that we have in our MLS, right? And so those are the ones you have to be a little careful with, because they may not share all the information that is available to you, right? So like if you want information that is as up to date as possible, you want to, one, make sure that you're using their tools, but then also sit down with your agent and have them help you sit down that search, right? Agents understand how other agents think. When they sit down and they're writing these listing descriptions, when they're filling out information, when they're adding features for a home, the agents are always thinking about all of these things when they are helping their buyers with their searches as well, right? We understand what features an agent may or may not be willing to put in there. The search criteria, the search results are really only as good as the input of the information that is included in the MLS, right? And so if you go into the MLS and you say, hey, I want a house that has a fenced yard, I want a house that is a 2-car garage and is over this amount of square footage, and I want a house that also has a stone patio in the back or a pool in the neighborhood, when you're putting in all these criteria, you're also eliminating houses where there may have been agents who didn't put that information in, right? And so when I'm inputting a listing, I'm the one that's filling in all the features for that particular house. And if the house has a fenced yard, but I neglect to put that in there, now all the buyers who are out there searching for a home with a fenced yard, they're not going to see that home pop up. Because remember what I told you, over 90% of people start their home search online, right? And so that's where people are flocking to find these properties. And so you have to understand, okay, is this a feature that an agent is likely to put or include in their criteria? And that's going to shape things as well. So you need to understand that and talk with your agent and help understand if the feature that you're looking for, that you want to include in your criteria, if it's something that the average agent wouldn't typically include in their criteria, you want to talk to them and understand that and make sure that you kind of broaden your criteria so you don't potentially miss out on those houses, because you might have to do it on a more case-by-case basis. And that leads me to my last tip, which is avoid being too narrow in your criteria, right? You want to keep these criteria as broad as possible, not too broad, right? If you enter in your criteria and 300 homes pop up, are you realistically going to look through 300 homes and determine whether or not each one of them could be a potential option? I don't know. Maybe you might be a person who just loves looking at homes, and you might be willing to do that. But the average person is like, this is way too much, especially me. I'm not one that likes to do a ton of window shopping. And so I'm like wanting to get directly to the point when I go looking for houses, right? So I don't want to have 400 or 500 criteria, right? You want to narrow it down to a reasonable amount, but not so much that you, again, miss out on something that could be a good fit. And this kind of plays into what I was talking about as well with the criteria that you put in there, whether or not that's included in what an agent offers. But let's say, for example, there was a person who said that a non-negotiable for them is that they really wanted to have a pool in the neighborhood. Right. That's a criteria that a lot of agents will often put in their search criteria. Not all the time, but most of the time they'll usually put it in there. And so you could very well say, hey, just show me the houses that show having a pool in the neighborhood. And that's great. But again, you want to leave open the opportunity for other solutions that could present themselves, right? So for example, let's say there's a house that doesn't have a pool, but down the street, less than a mile away, there's a local gym or a club that has a pool that you can buy membership to or access to. Whatever not MLS, but whatever HOA dues that you were paying to have access to that pool in the neighborhood is likely going to be lower now because that's not technically a part of this particular neighborhood, and you can use those additional funds to pay towards having a membership with that pool. In bonus, in this particular situation or scenario, let's say, for example, you join that pool club and you're going there for a couple months and then you realize, you know what, my family isn't really using this pool the way I thought we would. You can just up and cancel that pool membership and find something more productive to do with those funds. If you move into a neighborhood that has a pool, you don't get to just up and say, oh, we're not using the pool, so we're not going to pay our HOA dues this month. No, those HOA dues keep coming every single time, regardless of whether or not you're using that pool, right? And so in some situations, it may be more advantageous for you to find a neighborhood that has one close by as opposed to actually in the neighborhood. So that's just one example of ways that you really need to kind of keep an open mind and not become too narrow, too focused in what you're trying to add to your search. So those are just a few tips. Again, there's a ton more that goes into it, but those are some of the main things I usually tell people to start thinking about and start wrapping your mind around when you start that home search. I hope that you all find that helpful. As always, reach out if you ever have questions or need more information. Hope that you have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you next week.